Hello and welcome to the next lecture in the series of lectures on film photography and its allied principles on pre-press repro techniques class. So in the first two lectures of this film photography unit, we had seen in the first unit we had seen the latent image formation process of the on the film, the conditions based on Montgomery theory, lattice defects, Fresnel point defects, edge dislocation, all these things we had seen and we had understood the principle using which the latent image may be formed after the or during the exposure of the light sensitive film. Following that, in the next lecture, we talked a little bit about the construction of the film, the various purpose of gelatin, the emulsion, the types of films, and then we moved on to the film development process, the film development chemistry actually. So we saw how hydroquinone or metol is basically used as an alkaline developer to reduce the silver halide to metallic silver. Then following that we also add alkali or preservative to increase the rate of forward reaction. Then we add a restrainer, potassium bromide, to prevent the any form of reaction to the silver halide on the non-image area by the formation of something called bromide body, if you remember. Then we also talked about fixing with thiosulfate, fixing the non-image unexposed areas, the silver halide of the unexposed area, so that it remains there. The gelatin remains there. Gelatin is hardened with the help of alumina. Then finally, once the reaction has to be stopped, we use acetic acid to be precise, to stop the reaction in the stop bath. And finally, we wash out the film in order to prevent any formation of colloidal sulfur and its absorption into the gelatin from the thiosulfate that we had seen. So all these things we have already learned and we have already studied and we have understood. So in this lecture, the aim of this lecture is basically to discuss a little bit about the densitometry and the characteristic curve of the photographic film, but we will start with some other concepts which we will discuss. Okay. Now here you see the first thing, our aim in this lecture is to discuss about densitometry, but before we can start densitometry, we will start with some of the processes like in the intensification and reversal and all this some of the processes are there. Now once the film has been developed, right, you are able to see the film. Now through visual checking or checking through in comparison with the sensitivity guide, so I'll talk about sensitivity guide. So basically I can talk about it right now only. Sensitivity guide is nothing, basically it is a linear scale. You see, it has got some stepped wedges where this is 0% dot, this is 10% dot, depending upon your requirement you can choose. So up to 100% dot is there, right? And you will check the for example, these are the, now see, this is a negative, right? The image that you see in front of you is a negative, so the shadow in the negative is the highlight in the positive. Hopefully that is clear. Now just the reverse, you will check this I am saying in terms of the negative. All right, now you will check the shadow area, what is the dot percentage. Now if you see its dot percentage is maybe 70, you are not happy with it, you need to intensify it, you need to increase the dot percentage there. Not dot percentage, I'm sorry, but you need to increase the density of the shadow area in this negative film. So in order to do this, you need to enhance the silver deposition there, right? So this enhancement of that optical density is basically known as intensification, right? So formally speaking, intensification is an invaluable technique in which another metallic substance other than silver is deposited onto the silver chemically to increase the density of the underexposed or underdeveloped negatives. As I was saying, that if you have checked that this area is having 70% percent, it's matching with the 70% step, but you want to increase the density there, right? Density is nothing but, I'll talk about density. Density is nothing but the, the darkness or the lightness of the area. So this density you want to increase. So once you have already deposited the silver, now in order to enhance this, you can no longer use silver, but you can use some other metals to deposit in those areas, so that its overall density, optical density increases basically. All right. It can also be used to both decrease or increase contrast. Cutting or subtractive intensifiers mostly affect the shadow areas and have little effect on the highlights, thereby reducing contrast. Proportional intensifiers affect the highlights and shadows, but not equally. The highlights receive more intensification than the shadows. Super proportional intensifiers mostly affect the highlights, thereby increasing contrast. So let us take a look at some of the examples of this. Now here you see, this is the first type of intensification with the help of mercury. Alright, so what is the composition of the mercury to chloride bath? Water, mercury to chloride and sodium chloride, right? Next, this is the reaction mechanism. So mercury chloride does not dissolve in water readily, and so to hasten its dissolution in water, NH4Br2, NH4Cl, NH4I is used. The intensification is done in two steps. The first one, mercury is amalgamated with silver, here, this one, and in the second step, white images is blackened by the application of alkali. So as you can see in front of you, these are basically the reactions that you see. So first thing is to amalgamate mercury with silver and then deposit that onto the white image areas, so that it may be intensified, the image may be intensified. So going into the detailed reaction, that is not necessary over here. So just to know the basic understanding of get a basic understanding of all this principle is fine. Next we have the chromium intensifier. Chromium intensifier is a proportional intensifier. The amount of intensification is proportional to the amount of silver present in the negative. Therefore, denser areas of the negatives are more affected than the thinner or the lighter areas. Chromium intensification is useful for increasing contrast since it has little effect on thin and shadow areas. To be effective, chromium intensification must often be repeated several times. The two main ingredients are potassium dichromate and hydrochloric acid, and which are both basically hazardous chemicals. Hydrochloric acid can burn a hole in your skin, and dichromate can cause serious skin irritation. Negatives to be intensified with chromium should first be hardened either in the fixer or after fixing in the hardening bath. Failure to do so may cause the gelatin to reticulate and ruin the negative. Immerse the negatives in the bath until completely bleached. This converts the silver image into a combination of chloride and chromium compound. The negative is then washed completely free from the yellow stain about 5 minutes and redeveloped with a normal developer, not a fine grain developer, until the image has blackened completely. So the principle is basically here, since it's a proportional intensifier, you see, that is why the whatever is dark, that will get more darker without affecting the highlight areas, especially, right? This is the example of chromium intensification. And next we have the another type of intensification, although it is not mentioned here, but I would like to highlight on that. It's known as selenium intensification. A common intensifier here is the selenium diluted in water 1:2 ratio. However, before intensification with selenium, the film has to be washed thoroughly in plain hypo so that no residual hardener is left. Hardener will cause staining in both film and paper once it comes in contact with selenium. So I think hardener also has that effect of staining, so that should be removed. Next, we come to another process which is known as the chemical reversal. Now, reversal means just instead of through film photography, or instead of through process camera may be used to create a positive from a negative, but this can be done through negative reversal also. This can be done through chemical process also. So that is basically, this is the negative, right? From this, positive has been created. This has been done chemically. So that is why this is basically known as the chemical reversal process. Okay. Next, the reversal processing to create a positive image is possible due to the fact that most emulsions contain a percentage of silver grains that at normal exposure levels remain unaffected by both light and development. By developing the normally exposed silver grains and then bleaching them away, it is possible to redevelop the formerly undeveloped grains that remain to create a positive image. The first stage is known as primary development. In this stage, the exposed film is developed using an energetic developer to ensure that every exposed grain in the emulsion is developed. At this stage, the film is in the form of a negative. The negative is then immersed in a fresh acid stock bath, where development should be completely arrested. The second stage is known as bleaching. Such an H bleach consists of cupric chloride, acetic acid, and hydrogen peroxide, which results in dissolving all of the exposed grains of film from the first stage. The third and final stage is known as the reversal stage. This is where the negative is reversed into a positive. This is accomplished by either re-exposing to light or through chemical reversal, followed by secondary development. The second developer reduces all of the silver bromide not affected by the initial film exposure and left behind in the second stage. At the completion of second development, the film is now a positive. Alright, so here you can see all the reactions. Another thing that I would like to note is the nature and quality of the final image will be determined by the quantity and structure of the silver bromide left behind after the removal of the primary silver image during the bleaching stage. If the primary image was dense, as in an overexposed negative, then the exposure will have extended well into the emulsion and the image left behind after secondary development will be thin. On the other hand, if the initial image was thin, as in an underexposed negative, then the exposure would not have extended as far into the emulsion and the resulting image after the secondary development will have more density. This leads to two observations. First, primary development must be complete, and second, there is not a lot of leeway for over or underexposure when using the chemical reversal process. So that cannot be actually changed. However, experience shows that a slightly overexposed negative works better for scans and enlarged negatives. Alright? So this is basically the reaction. So I'm not going into the detailed reaction of it. I've explained the stepwise process, not going into much of the chemical reaction details. Alright. So this is, with this we come to the end of the photographic development and photographic chemical intensification, chemical reversal processes. Alright. Now next, this is an example. This is an image of the automatic film developer. Basically, we have one in our lab. So now we come to the topic of densitometry, which is perhaps one of the most important metrological aspects in print production. What is densitometry? But before understanding densitometry, let us first understand what is the meaning of density. To be specific, what is meaning of optical density? This is not to be confused with the density of that you use to measure of some fluids using your specific gravity bottles, not that density. Now, what density basically means, to put it simply, density is, or optical density is, how much dark the printed object is, right? So it is an estimate, it is a measurement of the darkness of that printed material, right? Now, in order to measure density, we will have different types of substrates. So for example, we can have a substrate like paper on which we have printed something. We can also have a substrate like film where we have taken an image, right? We have reproduced an image using our process camera. So we need to measure the density, optical density of the image area for both these materials, right? Now, what is the one basic difference between the nature of image or the nature of substrate that I have just talked about? That is, one is paper, another is film. So what is the one fundamental difference between the two? You see, paper, usually from the non-image area also we get some reflection, but for film we normally get transmission. That means the light in the paper is getting reflected towards us, but in case of film the light is getting transmitted, right? Because film is transparent, paper is not. So this is quite understandable. Now, what is the concept behind densitometry? Now, consider these two examples, situation 1 and situation 2. All right. Now, let us say that we have made 100% of some light of an. We have illuminated this paper surface. So, in this case, here you see a very thin film of ink, or no ink. In this first case, there is no ink film layer at all, right? There's only blank paper, blank substrate. In this situation, what we have done is we have made some light incident onto the paper surface. So naturally, some of the paper will be some of the light will will become absorbed within this paper itself, and some light will get reflected back in some angle. Now the question is, and this happens for all the things, right? This happens for all the situations, whether there is ink or not, doesn't matter. When we make some light incident onto the surface of the paper, we are supposed to get some light reflected out of it. That's true for all the cases here, 1 and 2 as well. But see what is changing, which factor is basically varying, you see. Now consider this, if it is only white paper, as you know, white basically reflects most of the light that is being incident on it. So naturally, if you're talking about white paper and you are making some light, 100% of light is incident on it, it is going to reflect back 90% of the light, let us assume. Why 90% of the light? 90% is quite high amount of light that is getting reflected back, because there is only limited absorption or scattering of light onto the paper, because there is no ink film who will absorb the light, right? So we are getting back 90% of the light. So if we assume that the 100% of incident light is, let us say, a density of 0, so proportionately, when we are getting 90% of the light, we can get some density reading, but that density reading will be very low, right? Maybe only 0.05, because for 100% of the light getting reflected back to us, we are considering that density to be 0, because we know that when 100% of the incident light is getting reflected back, then there is nothing, there is no ink film. So naturally, when 90% of the light is reflecting back, that density is very low, maybe 0.05. Now let us see when there is only very fine film of ink, right? Then what is happening? There is only 50% of light coming back, getting reflected back. What is happening to the rest of the 50% of light? Some of it is getting scattered, some of it is getting absorbed, right, onto the ink film, then onto the substrate and all this. So here the next density, this density of the ink film will be greater than the previous density that we obtained for only paper, that will be higher, right? And as progressively as we move downwards, where we see a very thick ink film, so that thick ink film will absorb most of the light. So if we incident 100% of the light, only maybe 0.1% of the light we will be getting back, will be getting reflected back onto us, because most of that light, 99.9 amount of light, that has been, what has happened to that light, that has been basically absorbed onto the ink film, right? So naturally the optical density for this particular film, ink film, will be the highest, will be very high. So the concept here is, lower the amount of reflected light, higher is the density, right? So this is in case of paper. Now in case of film, what is happening? Just replace the concept of reflection with the concept of transmission. Greater the amount of transmitted light, lower is the density, right? Greater is the amount of reflection, lower is the density, because there is no image area, no ink, no silver deposition, nothing who is going to absorb the incident light. That is why most of it is either reflecting back or most of it is either transmitting, right? So there, greater the reflection or greater the transmission of light, lower will be the density, and lower the reflection of light, lower the transmission of light, greater will be the density. I hope this is clear. This much thing is clear. There is another important thing that I would like to highlight here, is that the transmission has decreased by a factor of 10, right, for each additional layer. So here if you see, this is basically, in this image on the right, here you see this area is basically silver deposition. In the film we have silver deposition or metal deposition. Now this is, here you see the silver deposition has increased, right, progressively. We are assuming that the silver deposition has increased by a not the silver deposition has increased, but silver deposition has increased progressively. Now with the increasing silver deposition, what has happened? The transmission has decreased by a factor of 10. See, transmission has decreased by a factor of 10. When working with density units, we add to obtain combinations of different tones. When working with transmission units, we have to multiply. It is easier to handle density units in calculations. The use of logarithmic scale for density units permits us to express large quantities with small numbers, which in turn permits us to plot a large range of numbers on a reasonably sized graph. Another reason for using a logarithmic scale is that the response of the eye is logarithmic. For example, in the illustration, we have a transparency with 4 different tones, right? Here W, X, Y, Z. The intensity of the light transmitted through each tone is indicated by the lower arrows. So greater intensity of light transmitted, lower intensity of light transmitted. The length of the arrow is proportional to the light intensity it represents. The value of these tones as the eye sees them are indicated by the solid blocks, and the optical density of each tone is beneath the block. Since the light intensities are cut in half, the apparent tone values increases equally from W to Z, and the measured density increases by a step of 0.3, so increasing in the 0.3. The eye sees equal changes of density units as equal tone steps. So this is basically the entire process or entire concept of optical density, both types or both concepts of reflection type density, reflective density, and transmission density, right? Now let us take a look at some of the mathematical modeling of how to calculate this particular density. Now you see, we have this term reflectance. R here is reflectance. So what is reflectance? Reflectance is the ratio of the intensity of light which is reflected from the tone to the intensity of light which is reflected from the non-image, that is the paper itself, right? So IR is the intensity of light reflected from the tone means here the ink, and IRW is the intensity of light that is reflected from the white paper of the non-image area, right? So if this is reflectance, then we can deduce that the reflection density or reflectance density dr is logarithm of 1 by r. So this will be what? This will be I log of I RW by I R, right? Similarly, we can add another relation for transmission density also, saying transmittance is the ratio between the intensity of light which is transmitted to the intensity of light which is incident. So if this is transmittance similar to reflectance, then the transmission density can also be written as dt is equal to log of 1 by t. So if we expand this relation, then what do we get? Dt will be equal to, if this from here to here, dt will be equal to log of I by it, right? Similarly, for dr also it will be log of IRW by IR. So this is how we mathematically calculate. So since I was saying that we assume that for in this particular case, when 100% of light is getting, intensity of light is being received, then density will be 0, right? So in that situation we know how much amount of light has been reflected back by the white part of the paper and how much amount of light has been reflected by the tonal value, or how much amount of light has been reflected by the ink part of the image area, right? So this is how we calculate, mathematically calculate, deduce and calculate the density, optical density, either reflection type density or transmission type density of any image for that matter, or any printed patch or the film for that matter. Alright, I hope this is clear. Next, we move on to the working principle of the density. What is, how the this densitometer basically works? So a densitometer is the instrument. So let me write it down. Densitometer is basically the instrument which is used. Densitometer is the instrument which is used for measurement of the density of any printed patch or that of the film. Now see, let us, construction here has been given via a what is it, a schematic diagram. So what is here given? There is a source of illumination here which is basically making the light incident onto the printed substance. So this is the paper surface and this is the ink surface which is printed using a magenta ink. So here the light is basically made incident on this. There is some optics here which is focusing the light, and there is some polarizer. So I'll explain what a polarizer is and what is the function of a polarizer here. So this I will explain. We don't know what polarizer is. Then there is also this color filter. See, if you notice closely, for the magenta ink, the color filter that we have chosen is a green color filter. We have not come across the color separation and the principles of color mixing, so we don't know all this, but at this stage just know that for magenta separation we always use magenta ink, we always use a green filter for measurement of density. Alright, so basically green is the principal density of magenta. So if these terms seems a little bit confusing, don't worry, we have a dedicated unit, a chapter for color, which is a very big chapter. May get complicated a little bit sometimes, but yes, we will do it in great detail. Alright, now once the light is incident on it, some of it will be reflected based on the light which is coming out of the or getting reflected from the printed substrate. So in order to focus that amount of light, we need another optical setup which will convert that light. Then we have a photodiode basically which will receive the light and it will convert that light energy to electrical energy, and from that we have that A to D converter which will basically convert that analog signal to a digital signal and will give us some output based on that equation. Based on what equation that we had written, that dr is equal to log of 1 by r. So using this relation, we will be able to obtain a reading from the optical density reading of the ink, that is using your densitometer. All right. Now here some other notations are written. Don't worry, but the formula remains the same. So here beta reflectance has been displayed as beta, or written as beta, noted as beta. So I by I naught. What is I? I is basically the intensity of the light coming from the tone, and intensity of I naught is intensity of the light coming from the non-image area, that is the white substrate. So it gets reversed in the density form, right? Now there is another very important image or schematic or plot that is given over here. You see, normally we see what? Normally we understand that from this particular image, if you take a look, that when there is a progressive increase in the ink film thickness. So here you see the ink film from this to this has basically increased to a great extent, right? Now with the progressive increase of the ink film layer, the density of the optical density increases. Why optical density increases? Because with the increasing film density, greater amount of light is basically going to get absorbed. So density will increase. But there is a very interesting segue that I want to make over here. See this. With the increase, here is what is the plot here. So along the y-axis we have got the optical density, along the x-axis we have got the ink film thickness in microns. Now with the increase in the ink film thickness, we know that the ink film, the optical density will basically increase, right? But take a look at what is happening when the ink film thickness is going beyond a certain point. In this case, going beyond 3 microns. You see the curve of the optical density is almost getting flattened, no increase at all. Now you may ask why this is happening, because in the previous example we had seen that with the increase in the ink film thickness, the optical density is going to go up. Why it will go up? Because the amount of light that is getting reflected back from the printed ink film, that is getting reduced and reduced as we increase the ink film thickness, because greater ink film thickness will absorb greater amount of light. But then why this is happening? Just pause the video and here think for a bit over here. I'll give you the answer. The reason it is happening, if you see that, consider this ink film thickness. If you go increase the ink film thickness beyond this, already based on the ink film thickness here, the amount of light that is getting absorbed over here is very high, right? Only a very small portion of light is getting reflected. But it is never going to happen that we are no matter how much we increase the amount of light, 100% of light is going to get absorbed. Never going to happen, because some amount of light is always come back to us. Otherwise we are not going to able to see the ink film at all. If no light is getting reflected from the ink film, then we are not able to see the film at all, right? Then in that situation, no matter how much you increase the ink film thickness beyond a certain point, it is not going to absorb light more than it already has. So in this situation here, you see that beyond a certain point, no matter what, no matter you go on increasing the ink film thickness, the optical density will not increase. Because why? Because after this ink film thickness, that ink film is no longer able to absorb greater amount of light than it already has. All right. So this is very important to understand. You see. So there may be you can think that since density is a measure of the darkness of the ink or the printed matter. So if we go on increasing the ink film thickness and the darkness, or if the optical density will increase, but it is not the case. Optical density has its own limitations. No matter after a certain point, no matter how much you increase the ink film thickness, the amount of light which that ink film is going to absorb is not going to change anymore. And if this does not change, then the optical density is not going to change. So it will remain constant. That is why after a certain point, after a certain ink film thickness, the optical density is getting flattened. All right. So next we will be talking about this particular thing that we left out over here. I put a question mark over here. This is the polarizer, or the polarization filter. Now what is a polarizer? Basically, as you know, that light is basically a electromagnetic wave. So it has got the wave is basically, wave nature is making the light to vibrate whenever it's moving. It is making the light to vibrate in different directions or different planes. So this is the direction of propagation of light, but it does not mean that all the light will vibrate, light waves will going to vibrate in this direction only, but light waves are also going to vibrate in all possible other directions as well, right? So this is the electromagnetic nature or dual nature of light energy as we know it. Now see what is happening over here. What is going to happen if we are going to measure the ink film on the optical density of a wet ink film? What is going to happen then? Now you see, when the ink film is wet, that means on a freshly printed sheet of paper, what is going to happen? Think about it. What is going to happen? Just after printing the ink on a sheet of paper, the ink immediately will not, get absorbed into the paper, and normally paper surface is like this. It has got peaks and valleys. But if freshly printed of sheet, the ink layer will form a uniform film on top of it, because the ink has not got sufficient time to get absorbed into the, the valleys and getting absorbed into the paper. So it will form a very smooth and uniform layer on top of the rough paper. Now consider what type of, if you throw some light on this on this ink surface, what type of reflection will we get? We will get specular deflection, or regular deflection, right? Regular deflection, specular deflection means light will get reflected in only a single direction, right? So let us say that this is the direction of incident of light is falling in this direction, all right? Now in all these cases, it may so happen, because of the surface of the ink layer is reflecting the light in only a particular direction, maybe like this, right? So this is what specular deflection is, right? But once the ink film has got absorbed onto the piece of paper on which it is printed, then it will get this irregular shape of the paper, because it is absorbed. So in this situation, what is going to happen? Will specular or regular reflection take place? No. So here if you see, this is light falling here, then this is light falling here, and another light falling here. So this may reflect in this direction, this may reflect in this direction, and this may reflect in this direction. So here what we will get in case of dry ink film, what we will get diffused or irregular reflection of light. Now you see, whenever we are getting specular or regular reflection, when you are measuring, if you see the construction of our this densitometer, the receiver is in a particular direction. In case of specular reflection occurs when, if you have seen any glossy substrate or glossy printed material, if you hold it in a particular direction, you will see that gloss, because only in that direction all the light is getting reflected, most of the light is getting reflected. So in case of wet ink film, when there is specular or regular reflection over here, then less amount of light will reach the this analyzer and detector in the densitometer, because the way you have placed the densitometer and the arrangement of the detector, in that direction the light may not get reflected, because it is reflecting, when specular reflection is happening, it is reflecting light because of the smooth and the surface, glossy surface. Light is getting reflected in only a particular direction, only a single direction, right? Because of this, what is happening, the amount of light that will reach the detector over here is not going to be that high. That means when the amount of reflected light is low, then the optical density becomes high, if you remember from the past slide. Because why it is happening? Because in case of specular reflection, only one direction light, all the light is getting reflected. So our detector will not receive much of the light. It will receive less amount of light. If there is less amount of light, then the density will be high. But in case of this is wet ink film, and this is dry ink film, right? Now, in case of dry ink film, there is diffused or irregular reflection. Light is getting, scattered and reflected in all possible directions. So the chances of our detector in the densitometer to receive greater amount of light increases. So the detector in the densitometer will receive, because of this diffuse reflection, the detector in the densitometer will receive greater amount of light. So if the your detector in the densitometer receives amount of reflected light increases, then density decreases. So what conclusion we came from here? We came to this conclusion that for the same ink film or the same printed material, where in one situation the ink film is wet and after drying, if we measure the density of optical density or reflection density of the wet film and the dry film, we will get different readings for the same ink substrate combination or same print. Do we want that? No, we don't want that. That is why we use something which is known as the polarization filter. Now, as I said, what polarization filter is, what the nature of light is, it is having the direction of vibration in different directions, right? Now, you see, once polarization filter, the molecule is basically a polymer. It's like looking like a disc, basically. So in this disc, this is made out of polymer. The polymeric chains are arranged in a particular direction, maybe like this. So what is happening? The light having vibrational direction parallel with the direction in which the polymeric molecules are arranged in the polarization filter, only those light having only those vibrational directions will be able to pass it, right? So any vibrational direction, suppose any vibrational direction of light which is perpendicular to this will be stopped by the polarization filter, will not be able to pass it, right? So a less amount of light will be able to pass through the polarization filter. All right, now after getting incident, so what light is getting incident on it? Not light of all vibrational direction, light of only particular vibrational direction, right? And after reflection from here also, right, sometimes light get scattered over here, then again within the ink layer here, and they may appear to have different again vibrational directions. So again, not only in the path of the incident light, but we have also to place polarization filter on the path on which it is basically the detector is placed. So here also we see light of only particular vibrational direction, only this particular vibrational direction to pass. That means the overall amount of light is restricted. Why there is a difference of optical density measurement of the wet film and the dry film? Why is this happening? Because the amount of light which is coming from the wet film and the dry film, that is basically varying. But if we can restrict the amount of light which is first of all getting incident onto the ink film, and secondly coming out of the ink film after getting reflected, we can restrict the amount of light that is coming out of it, right, and reaching the detector. If we can ensure that a uniform amount of light having vibrational direction of a particular direction is reaching our detector of the densitometer in both the wet film as well as the dry film, then in that situation only we can ensure that the same amount of light reaches the detector no matter the ink film is wet or dry. If the same amount of light reaches the ink film, reaches the detector in both the wet film and the dry film situation, then what is happening? Then we will get for both the situations uniform optical density readings, right? I hope this is clear. This is the purpose of polarization filter, right? Okay, next we have this concept of, don't look at the formula and all. Next we have the concept of optical dot gain. So when we are basically making film, the negative film, there is a chance, because of some optical properties or the way light rays basically hits the film surface, then there is a chance of the size of the image area to increase. Now what is dot and that we don't know, but I'll just give you a brief idea. So let us see, let us consider this. This is the emulsion layer of the film. All right, now image is forming here, right? Images, this is the image area. So consider these are two images basically. Okay, so light is falling over here and it is hitting the surface, it is hitting the the image over here, and the final silver is getting deposited over here. Now see what is happening along the edges. Along the edges, because there is this image area, along the edges what is going to happen, light is going to get refracted, and it is going to, light was coming in this direction suppose, but along the edges, because there is nothing along the edges, light is going to get refracted away from the image area, leading, that means this light will actually lead to reach the final negative film. And when the image is formed, instead of the light passing like this and forming this size of image area, the size of the image area will increase. I think it is better for me to describe all this because we don't have any idea about half tone dots. So I think just by saying this is image area and this is, although I said this is emulsion, but these are actually two different layers. This is the screen and this is the film. So only when we discuss about what a screen is, what a film, what a halftone dot is, then only this concept will be clear. So let us keep this for the next chapter. After finishing today's lecture, next lecture is we are going to start on halftone reproduction. So during that, this concept of optical dot gain will be much more clearer. So in the machine class, you will learn about mechanical dot gain. In this P-Press class, you will learn about optical dot gain. Dot gain is of two types. Dot gain is nothing but increase in the size of the dot basically. Alright. So I'll not talk about this right now actually, but I will talk about this. This is another very important concept over here. This curve that you see in front of you, this is known as the characteristic curve of film, right? This is also known as the D log E curve. This is also known as the H and D curve, Hurter and Dreifield curve, or characteristic curve, or D log E curve. Hurter and Dreifield are the two scientists who worked on this work. Because of their work, this got their name. D log E curve, why? Because this is a plot which this is a curve which is being plotted with the density in the dependent axis and the logarithm of the exposure in the independent axis, right? That is why this is known as D for density, E for exposure, D log of E curve. Alright. Now what I am going to explain is that what is the purpose of this characteristic curve. Now you see there is a I need to explain the term which is known as contrast before I begin this. Now see what is contrast. Contrast is basically right now we will have a much more better understanding of basic density range. This is another term basically which is closely associated with contrast but not really the same. So contrast is basically the difference between the darkest part in the film. Since we are talking about films only, we'll consider all this for the film. So contrast is the difference between the darkest part of the film and the lightest part of the film. Alright. So this difference in the thing is known as basically the contrast. Alright. Now how to understand or how to determine what level of exposure I need to give for a particular film. So why is it important to understand what level of exposure I need to give for a particular film? Now consider this. You set a exposure for a particular film for 30 seconds, maybe say, let us say. Now, after 30 seconds, when you have exposed and developed the film, you see everything has been overexposed. So 30 seconds is too much exposure time. Now, another film, you see, so in the first experience, you saw 30 seconds is too much. In the second film, different type of film, you found out you tried to give exposure of 20 seconds. After exposure and development, you found that nothing has been exposed properly, everything has got underexposed, right? Image has not formed properly. Then how to mathematically determine that what exposure times or what nature of contrast there is for the film. So when a film is we say the term contrasty. Contrasty means with a relatively lower amount of exposure, the difference or the level of exposure or the level of development of the latent image formation of the film increases with a relatively short amount of exposure time, right? So if a film is contrasty, then it requires a very small amount of, not very small but relatively small amount of time for exposure. But if a film is less contrasty, then it requires greater amount of time for exposure. So this is basically your idea of characteristic curve and contrast of the film basically. Alright. Now let us take a look at the curve itself, or the characteristic curve itself. Now see, this is basically an S-shaped curve, right? So here you see a straight line section, a section over here, straight line. Then you have this another region which is another straight line, and then it is kind of getting stagnant at the top. This region A, A to B, this region is basically known as the toe of the curve. This B to C, which is the straight line, is basically known as the straight line section, and C to D, the top of the curve, is basically known as the shoulder of the curve, right? Now let us take a look at some of the other things which is present over here. You see, the curve is not starting from 0 here. The curve is not starting from 0 over here. Why? Because I already explained to you what fogging is. You remember from the previous lecture. So the film may start to get exposed automatically under storage also. Any extraneous light may come and hit the film and it will start to get exposed, right? Actinic light. Now the film has to, this characteristic curve has to account for that fog level also. Now here you see this is basically the base, and this height from which the the toe section basically starts, the curve basically starts, is known as fogging level for that particular film. So that means this 0.4 density range, that means the 0.4 density you have to kind of compensate for. That means you know that due to fogging I will lose 0.4 density value. Alright, so this is basically known as a fogging level for that film. And the straight line section is very important. You see, all the calculations that we'll be doing, all the contrast that we'll be seeing, or it will be calculated, that is going to come from the straight line section. Now let us, this image is a little bit all these things have been written, so let us take a look at this. Now you see here this is the fogging level in these three curves has been given over here. Now you see how to calculate the contrast of the film from the straight line section from here. Contrast is basically can be given as the slope of the straight line section of the characteristic curve, right? So how to calculate the slope? It's very easy. Calculate the tangent to the line, right? So you drop straight lines from here, right? You drop straight lines from here. This is the vertical distance. This much is the vertical distance. This is the horizontal distance. If this is theta, then how to calculate the slope of this line? By calculating the tangent to the angle, right? What is that? Let us say this distance, vertical distance is V, and the horizontal distance is h. Then tangent of that angle theta will be equal to the ratio between the vertical distance and the horizontal distance, right? This way you can calculate. Now the question is, this is also sometimes referred to as the gamma of the curve, right? Gamma of the film. Gamma means the contrast of the film basically, or the that can be obtained from the calculating the slope of the straight line section of the curve, right? Now you see how it depends on how all these things basically depend, how gamma controls the contrast of the film. Now from this thing, let us assume this is a no, let me just erase all these things. Now this is a curve, let us say this is curve 1, and there is another curve, let us say that curve is like this. Okay, this is curve 1 and this is curve 2. Now whose slope do you think will be higher, gamma 2 or gamma 1? Which one will be higher? Obviously gamma 2 will be greater than gamma 1. Now greater the contrast, or greater the slope of the straight line section of the characteristic curve for the film, greater will be the contrast for that film and lower will be the time of exposure, because as I already said, if the film is basically contrasty in nature, then it requires lower amount of time of exposure, because very quickly it is going to get exposed. So this thing is very important for you to remember, that if I give you the straight line section, or if I give you two curves like this, and if I ask you to calculate the gamma for this or contrast for this, and then from that calculation, if I ask you which film has the greater contrast, then you will be able to do, right? You just calculate the ratio between the vertical distance and the horizontal distance. That means the ratio between the density and the logarithm of exposure, right? Then you can calculate the gamma from that. Once you calculate the gamma from that relation, you can simply find out the which film is basically having more contrast. Okay, just by looking at it, you will be able to understand that which film is having more contrast and all that. Okay. Another, before I show you some examples of what this means, let me just take a second to explain some other interesting thing which is happening over here. Just take a look over here. What is this? This is log of exposure. So naturally, the more inquisitive among you may ask, okay sir, but on the dependent axis you have got this density, along the independent axis you have got not exposure but the logarithm of exposure. Why? We could have simply used a linear scale in case of exposure also, as we had seen in case of density, but why did we choose a logarithmic scale? You see, logarithmic scales are able to accommodate a greater range of data than a linear scale. I will explain all this when we do that half-tone class and colorimetry class in the next semester also. But the nature or the response of the human eye towards varying amounts of light is not linear in nature. It is logarithmic in nature. Alright, our eyes are more sensitive to low amounts of light than in high amounts of light. That is why when you just go outside from a dark room and so much in sunlight, initially, although you need our pupils are small and it has to be dilated for taking in a whole lot of information, but still you are not able to see a whole lot of information in very bright conditions than you are able to see under low light conditions. So that means what? Our eyes are not responding uniformly or linearly with equal changes in the amount of light at our periphery. That is why we choose any exposure measurement or densitometric or colorimetric metrology when we talk about exposure. When we talk about exposure, when we talk about light, we always use a logarithmic scale to account for that logarithmic response of the human eye towards light. This is precisely why we encode an image when we are taking a photograph in our digital camera or our phone. That image is automatically encoded with a gamma. So that concept of gamma is basically same, but a little bit different from what gamma I have given you over here. That we will do in the next semester in our color management class and all that. But that image has to be first encoded by the camera gamma, and then while displaying it on a display monitor, then that has to be decoded with the gamma of the display. So all these concepts are there. I am not going to all that detail. So that is why gamma is basically very much important, or contrast, understanding the concept of contrast is basically very much important. Hopefully this is clear. Now let us take a look at some of the example. So this is a correct exposure. The characteristic curve of the film is fine. That is why we have obtained an image which is equally exposed in all the areas. Image over here, or the characteristic curve, is basically moved in this direction towards the left direction. That means what? That this particular film is less sensitive towards light. That means there is a possibility of this film to get underexposed. You see, this film has got underexposed because its sensitivity is lower. Okay, contrast is not that much high. But once we use a film which has got higher sensitivity, that means curve is very much steep in nature, that particular film is going to get overexposed. That means the difference between the most shadow area and the most highlight area is going to increase so much that we will lose some detail in the highlight area. But in this case, when the contrast is low, we are losing some detail in the shadow area. But in this case, when the curve is more stable, or curve is more optimal, contrast is optimal, then we are getting a well exposed image. Alright, so this is what contrast plays. This is the role of contrast in development of films and from what characteristic curve we, all information that we can analyze, and we can use that information to determine the exposure times for that particular type of